Hello everyone. Hello everyone. You are someone and I am someone else, and today we're going to be talking about big corporations. Now, we're going to talk about what the difference between a private corporation is, or a private entity, and a public entity. A private entity survives off the backs of voluntary transaction. No government taxes coming into it. It also doesn't have a public stock market supporting itself. So, in a private hierarchy, which is like a family, little small family business, or like Chick-fil-A would be a perfect example. They don't need shareholders to support them because they're not in the public stock market. I think they have private shares you can buy. I'm not 100% certain, but still, they are basically all voluntary. They don't use government money or government resources normally to expand. Now, they might need to put a few deals, like I'm sure Chick-fil-A probably has a deal with a few highways or whatever, so maybe they do interact with government. In fact, I think every single piece of property is interacted with government because of the 16th Amendment, and maybe not the 16th Amendment, but states often tax on property. So you really own your property. You actually are renting it from the state, and I think I actually do like property taxes. I'm going to make a whole video on that, but that's besides the point. I think that's the best tax because land is fixed, and so you're not going to produce more of it. But if you tax it, there might be an incentive to make that land more efficient. But that's a whole nother issue we're not going to talk about. That's Georgism. But so basically, what is a private versus public? So public is a hierarchy. And socialists, there are many different types of socialism, which is why I always define right-wing socialism, left-wing socialism. All my videos, you'll notice that I do define those terms if you look back at my older videos. But we're going to talk about, when they say public, they mean all for the greater good, for all of humanity. But they also mean for the hierarchy, for the state. The state... but they also want to abolish the state, you know what I mean? So, like, it's very interesting. So, like, with left-wing socialism, once everyone has accepted the revolution, the state will wither away and we will take care of each other as in common humanity, basically, or socialized man. Meanwhile, like, right-wing socialists are like, oh, no, our group is better than the other group, conform or else. That would be kind of the right-wing socialism. So it'd be more like fascism, where it's like there is no private life. You just have to accept the both sides reject private life. Every space is political. The communists want to, communize everything. They want everybody to believe in communism. They want to make sure films, movies, coffee shops are all communist. Fascists, same thing. Everything's within the state, nothing without the state. And so once everything's within the state, then everybody can be taken care of by the state. And you basically have to do whatever the state tells you. The libertarians are against control. They're against both forms of socialism, regardless if it's left-wing or right-wing. They do believe, yes, that, if you go, let's say you have a private property, let's say you own a river, right? You own something next to a river. If you're poisoning that river and going into and that poison's going to somebody else's river, okay, I could see maybe government stepping in on that. But I can't see it stepping in on every single thing, you know what I mean? Again, like, to what extent does your property rights violate someone else's rights? And I don't know the answer to that question. I guess it is when your private property has poison or something that would necessarily violate someone else's rights. Like, if you're producing carbon, as long as you're not producing too much of it, like, as long as you're not producing, like, what is it, like 90,000 tons or something, you should be fine. Like, you breathe carbon. Every day you breathe. And these, like, socialists, the left-wing ones anyway, that were environmentalists, the ego comms, right? Or ego progs, they're called, I guess, environmental progressives, or progs. The progs want to, they want to reduce the amount of carbon in the air, and, let's say you breathe carbon, well, they can reduce your life too, I guess, in that extent. Or they want to reduce the truck you're going to buy, and maybe trucks do produce more carbon than what we need, than what's the environment can sustain. I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't think anyone does. In fact, I think scientists are often funded by the academia, and so they're inherently corrupt and biased on their findings. I could be wrong, but I don't know. And again, even if I was a scientist, well, would I get paid by those same people who would also fund the study? Like, to me as a scientist, I don't think there is actually anything, there is no such thing as a neutral science. There is no such thing as really objective science because everything's funded by money. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think what's the most objective thing is just to see where what the market believes, kind of. You know, the objectively, Jeff Bezos has billions and billions of equity in Amazon, right? But you know, subjectively, well, maybe I don't believe he should have that much equity in Amazon. You know what I mean? So, like, I can kind of see where the socialists are coming from with that. But again, like, Amazon is not a private corporation. I hate when people say, oh, Amazon's a private corporation. No, I could buy stock tomorrow in Amazon. I could buy stock through, well, first off, I'm an employee, so I can buy it for the employee stock options, which they had even more voting rights than the regular stock. I could buy it through the regular stock market with freaking Robinhood, although I think as an employee I'm not allowed to. But let's say I wasn't an employee. I could still own Amazon not being an employee. And then once I had enough shares, I can become board of directors. It is a public hierarchy, and I hate when people say, "Oh, it's not attached to the rest of humanity." No, it is, and in fact, they work with the SEC on a lot of things. I would argue, or maybe they don't, but either way, that SEC regulates them. That's also part of the public sphere. So I mean, there's a lot of, and then of course the Amazon did make a deal with New York City saying they were going to build a factory, and guess what? New York City said no. So there's clearly a relationship there. But I think every public and private hierarchy has a relationship. I think that private hierarchies, however, are less oppressive. And so as a libertarian, I want as many smaller private families as possible. Basically, a family, once you get 2 or more families, you are considered a public hierarchy. And that is what a lot of people just in the United States, because the family structure is crumbling, the United States divorce rate's high, things like that. They've completely lost the historical meaning between private and public, and that is really scary, and that leads to the ideals of communism, as I have noted in my earlier videos. Communism inherently believes in no. They inherently believe in no state, but that objectively would destroy everything. I think in some ways, maybe I'm wrong, but. Let's say you destroy the state. Well, then you would destroy that framework or that constitution that regulates people, regulates commerce, regulates whatever, right? You would inherently destroy their society of law. You don't want a society of law. You want a society of men. Is what the socialized man, which is what the socialists want. I could be entirely wrong, and again, I've made fun of the labor theory of value before. I've made fun of all these socialist arguments, but this one argument that, oh, Amazon's a private corporation, they can do whatever the heck they want. Well, they're basically owned by the public investors. Anyone can invest billions of dollars in Amazon. It's not a hard task. It's run by the public. They have to do what the SEC tells them to do. There is a common of humanity there. And the fact that my brother and all these socialists, they don't understand. And I also think about Temu. Temu is a state-run entity competing against Amazon, and they ship way cheaper than Amazon. And Temu will probably dominate the United States based on the fact that they've so many ads and stuff. They might not. But Amazon, again, they've killed off all these small private companies, all these small mom and pop shops, and now Amazon's struggling to compete with Temu in the United States. So now Temu is cutting into Amazon's private line. So I mean, there's competition, and people argue, oh well, isn't it sad that these little companies that were such defining by their family history now that they're gone? Like, isn't that kind of sad? And I'm like, yeah, but that's because you let the government hoard themselves out. There is a publicness in that, and the socialists are they want to use the public for their own aims. They don't realize when they use the public for their own aims, it inherently exploits them. Think about rent control, or when they say, oh, we want affordable homes, right? This is what socialists want. And then what they do is they give money to poor people. But now the people who are working don't get that money. And now rent has gone up for nearly 80% of the people who didn't get that money. And so you've just increased the amount. Even if you taxed rich people, let's say you didn't print money, you taxed rich people to fund this program, you still inherently are going to cause rents to go up, regardless of what you do. If you let any form of bureaucracy grow in a public sphere from a, let's say you had a bunch of private spheres and you add a bureaucracy in between that, which is the public sphere, you are going to increase expenses. And this is why I don't like left-wingers most of the time. They just disagree. They might be socialists, they might be Keynesian, but I just disagree with left-wingers on economics. They clearly don't understand that you just can't expand them. Like, the money supply, the inflation rate should be slightly above production. The problem is right now our inflation rate's about 3 times higher than production. And our GDP growth has really slowed down because of that. They don't trust our money as much anymore. And we've been using our money as a weapon against Russia during the Ukrainian war, which is even worse, in my opinion. Our money should be a neutral thing. It shouldn't be used as a political tool against other countries. But we've done it. We've done it, and I've been arguing against doing that because now we can't influence as many countries anymore. I think we should view the long term, not the short term version of what Russia's. And Russia's going to collapse anyway. It doesn't even matter. We've just distrusted so many people. A collapsing country, Russia, and we're gonna throw our money away because we don't like this one country. It's just so sad to me that we're stage one thinking. We're not thinking beyond stage one. And that's kind of what makes me, and obviously most people are, they want to watch the ball game. They want to do simple things, and then these socialists are all thinking beyond stage one in terms of what they want to control, but they're not thinking beyond stage one of what's going to actually happen if they go through with their plan. And so that is the issue I have with left-wing people. Right-wing people, they know exactly what they're doing. If they're like, let's say they're national socialists like the Germans, World War II, let's say they want to, weaken immigration, and they want to get rid of all the bankers, the quote-unquote, terror, I don't know, let's just say they believe there's an ethnic minority controlling all the bankers, right? They want to show, and then they also want to increase tariffs so that you don't buy any foreign goods. They want to increase the manufacturing in this country, and they want to make sure nobody buys property outside this country, right? That would be a national socialist. That would be right-wing socialism. They believe in the state. They believe in the group over the individual. But, the major difference is they believe in the hierarchy more than the left-wingers. So, left-wingers eventually want to abolish the hierarchy by, destroying all hierarchies, even the private ones, like little families that make money, like the Amish or whatever. And then the right-wingers want to have a massive, group, whether it be like an ethnic, I'm not saying that all right-wingers are like this, but there might be some ethnic national socialists, or this be like the Italian fascists, where, there was no such thing as an Italian during World War II, but they wanted to create a Italian Mediterranean group, uniting all the Italian languages into one language, and again, everything within the state. Italian fascism is very different from regular, neo-fascism or even post-fascism. It's very interesting, but it's besides the point, right? I feel like all these plans that people have come up with, all these schemes to, and again, people have asked me, why is Amazon so big? Well, it's because the government is big enough to make deals with Amazon. It's because the government's allowed them to be this big. Government's made rules on smaller businesses and not rules on Amazon. The rules should be, checked throughout all, like, Amazon didn't grow this big despite voluntary transaction alone. I think there is some case to make that if there was no government, that it was all this voluntary transaction, I don't think Amazon would be as big. I think there would be other competitors that might actually compete with Amazon. I could be wrong. But you could make let's say in a hypothetical scenario that Congress isn't able to regulate patents or whatever. Patents are inherently a regulation on the free market. Let's say licensing, medical licensing. Let's say little private families created licenses instead of the state or the public hierarchy. Those things are restrictions on the free market. I mean, yes, you kind of want doctors to be competent. I can understand that argument. But, you know, anytime you have two families together, it's public. And these socialists, obviously, they don't understand that they're for the state because they want to make everybody have a free home. And so you need the state in order to do that, but they say they're against the state, which is just so weird to me. But I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something on there. I mean, I'm reading their literature, I'm learning, but it's not clicking. I've just always been opposed to it. I just think that they just don't think the same way I do. I think very John Lockean. I think there are some natural rights. Your property is your labor, like a representation of how much you've worked in your labor, and then your right to self-protection, your right to own weapons against other, the public hierarchy. I think that's a very important thing. You must have a private life in a John Lockean sense, a very individualistic sense. And again, like socialists, they want to think more collective, I guess. How can you collectivize something if there's anarchy? I just don't understand. That's another thing I don't understand. There's a lot of anarcho-socialists, but those two definitions contradict each other. Because socialism means public, but anarchy means a bunch of groups fighting over resources with no state to regulate rights or property or whatever. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Oh, when something goes public, right? When something goes public in the stock market, right? Let's say IPO. That's when that company becomes a public company, when it IPOs into the public market. If it's not on the stock market, in the private market, let's say it's Chick-fil-A, or if it's Mars Corporation, which Mars Corporation's not on the stock market, however, it does make a lot of deals with public companies, so I could argue, because it makes more deals with public companies, you could argue it's in between private and public, maybe. Then you could say those companies are private. Chick-fil-A and Mars grow organically because they don't rely on the public market to give them money, shareholder money. They rely only on the customers, really, to give them money. Anyway, you are someone, I am someone else. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about what I believe between public, private, public, private, socialized versus non-socialized, or individualistic, or family versus multifamily. Hopefully you've learned something. Goodbye.